About that, everybody. We were having a little bit of a sound glitch in here. My name is Kelly Henderson. I am a realtor and owner of Momentum Real Estate Group here at Keller Williams Biltmore Partners. Today we're going to get started kind of talking about what I've done in my personal business to kind of go from zero, which I would consider about 2.5 years ago, to being a self-sufficient place in my business right now. We're going to talk through that. It's not really meant to be a 100% guidance for anybody or something to 100% duplicate. I realize everybody has their own way of doing things and their own items that work for them, but we're going to walk through some things together that's worked for me and hopefully it'll work for you. As we go through the discussion, please feel free to send in your questions if you do have any, and then we will go ahead and have some time for Q&A at the end. So here we go. So as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about real estate. Everybody has a story. Mine sort of looks like this: life pre-capping, post-capping, kind of what I'm doing now in the future, and then some takeaways I have for everybody. So let's get started. So I think it's really important for everybody to kind of have their own story and to know where they've come from. This is what mine looks like. We are KWYP, so as you can imagine, I'm pretty young. I'm 25, so I jumped into real estate right out of college, most like a lot of people in our group. And something I really wanted to touch on are what I like to consider the core days. I'd like people to know kind of where I've come from, that I didn't jump into real estate because I had nothing else better to do or something like that. I actually grew up pretty poor and was homeless for a couple years in my youth, and I understand where a lot of our clients are coming from when they talk about homeownership as the American dream. So I like to kind of keep where I've come from in mind, as well as how I'd like to move forward. I graduated from the University of Arizona in 2011. I hope we have some Wildcats on here. And that's really where I was kind of a lost lamb. I know everyone usually asks, how did you find real estate? I was supposed to go to grad school, and after I decided not to, I met with a career counselor, and between kind of discussing what I wanted life to look like, she threw out real estate. I did some research and realized it was the perfect match. I started school just a couple months after graduating, and here we are today, which brings me to real estate and really everything that's happened in the last 2 years and kind of what I've done in my own personal business. Gary talks a lot about the big why, so I wanted to touch upon a bit of my big why. As I talked about, I was homeless for a while. I'm not talking about homeless like living on the side of the road or something. It was kind of just hopping from one friend's house to another friend's house and staying with people we knew, and a couple things like that. So really my family lacked that whole homeownership aspect. So I have here for you a picture of my mother. My mom bought her first home at age 53. This is her signing. She was probably one of my first like 30 clients that I had, and she is the reason I do what I do and that I'm so proud of what I do. So I know that everyone doesn't have a big why as far as some drastic story that's happened in their life, but what is your big why? Your big why could mean what you do. So I have a different big why now that we'll kind of touch upon, or where you've come from or something like that. What kind of gives you the gas in your engine, for example. So this is kind of my big why now. Obviously, I love KWs, build careers worth having, businesses worth owning, and lives worth living. I think when a lot of people think about and talk to agents that have had any measure of true success, they imagine what their life might look like, and that it looks like no weekends and working hard. And don't get me wrong, I've done both of those. But now my life looks very different. This is kind of an idea to give you on what I've done in the last 2 years, and with the exception of the loan that we have out on our home, all of this is paid for and clear. The point that I show this out is because there is the light at the end of this hard work tunnel. There are reasons that we do what we do, and these are my reasons. My husband, Dustin, we've been married for just over 3 years now, is on the right, and we took our honeymoon for 2 weeks where I didn't even bring my cell phone or my laptop in Fiji, so work free. It's doable. let's get into it. All right, life pre-capping is really one thing that I think a lot of our, really a huge portion of our agents are in this kind of category. I like to call this chapter of my life self-employment, life on being broke, working for free, and other joys of being your own boss. It's a bit of a joke because I think that it feels like this, that's for sure at the beginning, but at the same time there are obviously the real beauties to life on being self-employed. I remember my first closing I had. If you've been in the business a while and you're frustrated that maybe you haven't had your first closing yet, mine came 5 months into the business and it was a rental. So don't beat yourself up too bad. But I remember when that rental closed, I did some math based off of the, $300 commission I got, and I figured, wow, I just made like 14 cents an hour for the last 5 months, and that at least was a plus. And then I had my first real transaction that closed, and I thought, gosh, I'm making $4 an hour now. This isn't too bad. And then the third closing, and then finally I started to do math that thought, I don't really know anybody else that's making this kind of money if I really truly broke it down to an hourly wage or a salary type of wage or something like that. So while starting off can be rough, once you start to get to that balance, it feels much better. But really I'd like to talk about how I went from 0 at that 5-month mark to capping in that first year. So prospecting obviously is what we hear pretty much 24 hours a day, that we should be lead generating, prospecting to get business. Prospecting is important, but it's also important to kind of focus your efforts. I think we all agree we could have our life spread thin among 1,000 different avenues for prospecting, but this is really what I did that first year in the business. Facebook was actually probably about 30 to 35% of my business that year. I consider a Facebook closed deal to be somebody who I'm friends with on Facebook, but outside of that don't really know them. So people I graduated high school with that I don't really talk to anymore, people I met once upon a blue moon in college at a party or something, these would all be Facebook-driven closings. At this point in time, I wasn't paying for any marketing on Facebook, so really that was all just organic people I knew and making sure I was in their face. A couple different ways you could do that. For me, I did a lot of trying to connect Facebook posts with my real life. So maybe I'm picking up Starbucks on the way to an open house, and you take one of those famous Instagram Starbucks shots. Cold drink on my way to an open house, who wants to pop by and see me today? Or had my first closing, can't wait to celebrate with my friends tonight. Something like that that was a good way to connect real estate and remind people of real estate without bashing them over the head about market stats and look at my new listing and things like that. So that's Facebook. My sphere of influence was the other large portion of closings that year. So referrals from other clients that I had already closed in that year, friends, family. For me, since I'd recently graduated, my sorority sisters were a huge portion of that sphere of influence. I've read that they say that somebody has to hear you're in the business 7 times to remember it. And so I thought, well, I better get myself out there. And I remember being in the business for just about a year when I had gone to my homecoming for school, and I'm sitting in the sorority room at our house with everybody, and we're supposed to go around and introduce ourselves, and I said, my name's Kelly Fast. This was at the time. My name's Kelly Fast, and I'm in real estate. And everybody laughed and said, oh, really? We had no idea. And that's the goal. Everyone should know. I didn't surprise anyone that day when they heard that I was in real estate. I wanted to make sure they all knew up front that that's what I did. That way I come to mind. And then actually the biggest chunk of my business in that first year came from other agents. I would love to think that all KW offices have the same culture and that this would spread evenly. So going off that assumption, one of the things that I did getting started was I introduced myself to all the big agents in the office. I knew everyone on the ALC by name, came to them with questions, and then the biggest thing I always ask them is, what can I do for you? I'm here, I'm a sponge, what can I do for you? What can I hold open? Do you need any buyers shown while you're on vacation? I did all of these things, and then eventually what I found is when their business got to a certain point, so maybe a team that wasn't ready to hire the next buyer's agent yet, but still had a surplus of leads, stuff like that. They started forwarding that stuff to me, and about 40 to 45% of closed business actually came from agents in my own office that trusted me with their business and appreciated the energy that I brought to the table. So other things that worked for me in that first year, really like to give a shout out to Bold. I started my first round of Bold about 3 weeks before I got my license. So as you can imagine, and anyone that's actually been to Bold, it can be extremely overwhelming to not know how to write a contract and yet be taught how to lead generate FSBOs and expireds. And I just felt so gung-ho that my photo right there on the right gives you an idea of what I did. This was actually still before I had my license. I set up a little table on my driveway of the house to try to get people to come up, and the idea was that my mom was going to hand out candy to the kids, and then I had hot cocoa with my business cards stapled on a little packet, and I was going to try to get in contact with the parents, make a connection to people in my own community. Well, the main problem I had was that not enough people were coming up to our table, and my goal was to hit my goal 100 that day. So I decided to reverse door knock, and I guess it is just door knocking, but reverse trick-or-treating is what I called it. And I started running down the streets, door knocking on doors. Everybody answers on Halloween, and in probably an hour I had my goal 100. I'd introduced myself to pretty much the entire community, and I'd really finally gotten my footing in real estate. Since then, I've taken Bold a total of 5 times. I've only missed one Bold that has come to our region, and I learned something from it every time. There hasn't been a Bold that I walked away feeling like, well, that was a waste of my money or something. I like to liken it to reading the Bible. I learned that in Sunday school, that you never, like anything, you never step into the same river twice, for both the man and the river are different. So every time I go to Bold, I like to focus in on something different. So even if you have been to Bold a number of times before, focusing on whatever is important to you that round, I think will really help you still extract different information and really hone in your energy on different areas. Leverage was also really important to me that first year. I knew that I wanted zero to do with paperwork. That's not my area of expertise. I also am just not very tech savvy, as you will probably see throughout the presentation. I'm sure I'll switch screens and get all confused, but dot loop and is a great tool, but it still confuses me, and at the time we were still having SureClose, and there was just too many systems out there, and it was such a time suck. So I did my first 3 transactions by myself so I could truly get a feel for how everything worked in case I was ever in a position where I needed to do it myself. But from that moment on, I hired a transaction coordinator. Transaction coordination prices are different from area to area. I was just teaching in Vegas, and I think they pay $75 a transaction, which I was like, holy smokes, I wish I had that. We pay, I believe it's $300 a transaction here to utilize our transaction coordinator in the office, and I never saw that as an expense. It's just part of doing business for me, and then that way I could use my time on lead generating. So I really think that that helped me to keep moving forward instead of riding that roller coaster of commission. Knowing your numbers, and obviously you should know your goal numbers and where you are for the year and your volume and stuff like that, but this set of numbers I'm talking about is more about your office specifically. So you get started in the business, and I heard 2 sides of the coin. My first fear was that, well, people will know I'm young, so that will definitely stink when they think I'm not even old enough to sell real estate or something like that. And then the other fear I had a lot of was that besides being young, that they would know that I'm brand new. Oh, what if somebody asked me how many transactions I've done, stuff like that. Looking back on it, I really don't remember if people ever asked how many transactions I've done. Maybe there were a couple times, but I don't really ever remember it being something that actually happened. But I remember always being prepared that if the question came up, or if it did come up, if I don't remember, my answer was always, I knew how many closed transactions my office had for the year. I knew what our volume was for the year, which sounds really impressive. We've sold 99,000 or 99 million this so far this year, or whatever the case is. It was awesome being able to dole out those numbers, or at least have them, because then I had no fear of the question coming up. When you say we have closed blank, people don't get it. They don't know the difference between we or you, or even if they do, then you can back up that question with, well, I myself have only closed 1 or 3 or whatever the case is, but Keller Williams is the #1 brokerage in the nation, and we have agents helping us out, and I have a mentor and our director of first impressions and my broker and my designated broker and all these different things that you can utilize to show them that I'm not in this alone. You could also lean back then in on maybe a script having to do with, well, while you are hiring me to work directly with you, it's the representation of my entire brokerage, and then switch into those numbers of what the brokerage does on a year-by-year basis. And then the other numbers that I think are really important to have a really great grasp on are your market numbers. I know it always cracks me up when you read an article written by an agent that says, oh, we're in a buyer's market, and you go back and you look at the stats and you look at what's happening, and you're 100% in a seller's market. Where is the confusion there? Are they just not familiar with the stats? Are they just hearing what they hear on the radio or the news or something? I'm not quite sure, but knowing and being able to explain your numbers is probably another huge reason that people never really asked how long I've been in the business. If you can explain to somebody month supply of inventory and how quickly things are moving and how prices adjusting up and down and in relation to the last few years, when you can relate those numbers around, there really has been no question. So knowing your numbers is also important. And then the other thing I hear with not just new agents, but a lot of different people is, well, I never wanted to get into real estate because I didn't want to have to give up my weekends. I will tell you right now, I don't work weekends typically. Obviously, there's always an exception to the rule. Maybe if we have some out-of-state buyers who are in town for just a Saturday and a Sunday, or if I have a brand new listing I'm super excited about holding open as opposed to letting another agent, that might be an exception. But typically, I'm a Monday through Friday kind of worker. I like having that time set aside. I know not everybody likes that. If you want to go balls to the wall and 7 days a week, that's fine. Make sure to keep in mind your burnout rate, making sure you're kind of keeping yourself centered. But I'm here to tell you now that you do not need to work weekends if you don't want to. One pushback I get on that is, okay, well, what if somebody does ask for a Saturday at 5 p.m. appointment? 2 different things you can do. The first is I set the standard with all of my buyers right out of the gate. We have a form that we give them. It's called How I Work. If you email me, I can send this out to you as well. But the How I Work form is essentially how we do business. The first question on there are hours of operation. We highlight we're open for normal business hours Monday through Friday. We're here from 8 to 5. And then I do then later explain that we can do weekend appointments and evening appointments for people who don't have that flexibility. But I explain to them that it does need to be scheduled in advance and stuff like that. And we do get a lot of we don't get a lot of those requests as a result, which is wonderful because now they know. I explained to them in that same turn that well, you know, just like you, I have a life and a family outside of my work, and I want to make sure that I'm honoring both of those commitments. You understand, right? And using those tie-downs and other things that I've learned in Bold, it's helped me to make sure my clients understand right up front that I'm a person just like everybody else, and that real estate is something that requires an appointment just like anything else. So that's the first way I do it. And then the second way I do it is, let's say I do get, it's 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I get somebody asking for a 7:30 time slot that same night, and I already have plans with my husband or whatever the case may be. It's not their business what you're doing. So you don't need to say, oh, well, I already have plans with my husband and I can't. It's not their business, quite honestly. So I just let them know I have an appointment. That's my go-to for everything. The appointment is with my husband or whatever the case may be. But when you phrase it that way, which is exactly what it is, they hear it from more of a business perspective and realize that they need to treat you as a business owner. So that's been beneficial as well. These are kind of the takeaways and the results that I got from that. So some lessons that I learned are that it's okay to show your excitement. I think I was I was really out there, and I mean, I'm sure maybe people thought it was annoying or something, but for the most part, I got a lot of positive feedback, a lot of people that felt that I was able to kind of energize their own business, and quite honestly, on the flip side, I'm seeing that in my own business now. When we have new agents who come in and are all jazzed up and just ready to hit the ground running, I get excited, and it reminds me of where I need to be in my business and where my focus needs to be. And then this might be the microwave generation right now, but real estate certainly is not instant. The other day I got a text on my phone that said, hey, just so you know, I've connected you with my coworker or whatever, and here's their contact information. They're looking to buy a house. That stuff so rarely happens when you're new, and when you've gotten further in and you have such a big database and all the work that you've been doing to constantly remind them is so ingrained in their brain that it becomes easier. But to get started, it's not instant. It's something you really have to work at and make sure that you're really focused on the fact that one of the things I remember always thinking about was real estate agents typically have a 2-year kind of window of involvement before they either let their license go inactive or drop out of the business entirely. And I remember thinking, all right, 2 years are the hardest, but that must mean that there is a pretty easy road after that bump. And I remember anytime I had a rough day or a funky client or something, I would always focus back to, this is why 2 years is kind of the average. If I can get through this, I can make it to the 2 years, and it'll be smooth sailing after that. Don't get me wrong, there's still things that pop up, but it's very true. I think the first 2 years were definitely the hardest. It's a huge learning curve, and there's a lot going on, but once you are able to get through that first portion, it's pretty smooth sailing. So just make sure if you're thinking about getting into real estate or know someone who has been, or if you're kind of skimming the surface on maybe I just want to do this part-time, all of those are fine if that's the goal of your business. But if the goal of your business is to make a career that is your source of income, keeps you busy, whatever the case may be, it's not going to happen overnight. So just be a little patient. These are the results I got from that first year. Capping in our office is an income of 60,000 GCI. I actually hit, I want to say it was 59,800 or something. So I suppose technically I too did not cap my first year, but really right up at that. I was Rookie of the Year for our office with just over 30 transactions. And something I'd really like to touch upon about the whole Rookie of the Year business was, don't get me wrong, it was way cool. But one of the things that I think I learned most from that was everyone who knew me knew that was my goal for that year. I announced it publicly at Gold, that first Gold, and the second one actually. I emailed it out to all the agents in there, letting them know that if they're going to be out of town or need help with anything, that this is my goal. I'm here to help in any way I can so we can create a win-win situation. I posted it on Facebook. Everyone in the office knew. Everyone knew. And it's really what what you focus on expands, and I believe that that comes true everywhere. So put your goals out there, and I think that that helps. Moving on to, this would be my 2013 year. So this was my second full year in the business. I'm going to start with, I've been going to these classes where the big thought process right now is begin with the end in mind, and it's great when you're thinking of your systems and when you're thinking of how you want to do business. Think of how it can be multiplied. Can I close 10 transactions a month this way? Can I close 20 a month this way? Are the systems going to be expandable? It's a great thought. But when you get into real estate, you don't know what all's out there. When I got my license, I remember I didn't know how much money I could expect to make. I remember I didn't know, you just don't know, you don't know that teams exist. There's so much that's unknown. So yeah, begin with the end in mind, or just start wherever you are now. And that's what I did last year. I found out teams existed a couple months into the business. I liked the theory. It was still way over my head. I mean, I hadn't been on a listing appointment yet, so how would I come up with a team? Stuff like that. Once I got that in my brain, that was probably beginning like January-ish of 2014, I decided that was going to be the goal for this year. So July 1st is our anniversary date for Momentum Real Estate Group. It's when I founded the PLLC, the team, and then also hired my first executive assistant. So just because you're already through a couple years, couple months, whatever, into your business, doesn't mean now is not the perfect time to start. Wherever you're at, that's the perfect time. Lead generation, again, let's focus on that. That's how we create this business worth owning. Don't do everything. Let's figure out really what you can hone in on to get you the results. My sphere and referrals are still the biggest source of income for me currently. My sphere being a big portion of that, but referrals are still taking the lead. And I'm not just talking about referrals from my sphere, I'm talking about agent-to-agent referrals. Most of the time they're not coming from my own office anymore. So as I've been going to family reunion and different bowls, I'm actually seeing probably about 30 to 35% of the business is coming from referrals outside of state. We're actually closing a $500,000 deal on Friday that was a referral from outside of state. So just make sure when you are going to training events and different seminars that you're really putting yourself out there. Don't be in a little cocoon when you go to them. They're exhausting. Not only are you learning a lot, but you're also trying to interact with a lot of people. So just make sure to put yourself out there and have a bajillion business cards with you. On that front, I also do follow up with handwritten cards. I'm a sucker for handwritten cards, so that might be a good avenue to take as well. For sale by owner, FSBO is something else I really got jazzed up about last year. My bold that came in the fall of 2013, that was my goal. The first bold started, I wanted to have one FSBO listing by the end. So that's all I did the entire time. I tried a couple different scripts that I think probably are the reason that it took so long to get my first FSBO. But the day before our graduation, I took my first FSBO listing, and they are a fantastic source of business. It's confusing to get started and scary, but just realize they're people just like us. They just don't know what they don't know yet. And I find that something that makes me feel a lot better is when I come across somebody who truly doesn't understand the value in a real estate agent. It's because we haven't done our job. We haven't taught them that the NAR stats that show that for sale by owners make over 30% less when they list by themselves as opposed to with an agent. The NAR 2010 stats showed the average home sold for just around $200,000 with an agent, and the average for sale by owner home sold for $150,000. You can turn that question around and say, so is the 6% commission, and in most cases you're really only talking about the listing side commission because they're already offering a buyer side commission. So is that 3% listing side commission worth that $50,000 to you? And in the majority of cases, unless you're talking about multi-million-dollar homes, the answer is going to be yes. And then lastly, farming. Farming is a time-consuming or financially consuming gig, depending on how you want to buy into farming. I highly recommend, if you have the patience and the consistency, to go for it. Kenny Klaus here in the East Valley in Arizona started his own designation, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but I want to say it's like I think it's CLME. CLME designation, which is specifically a designation for farming. I have my CLME. I learned from Kenny in a couple classes, and so when I selected my neighborhood, which as you do some research, or work with the CLME program, you'll find that there are different neighborhoods that may or may not be worth your time. Turns out the turnover rate in my neighborhood is lower than I probably would want, but the average price point is 3%, or excuse me, not 3% higher, 3 times higher than the average price in our greater Phoenix metro area. So I figure, all right, if I only sell one less home a year, which is really what the numbers broke down to, but I was making 3 times more, would I be comfortable with that? Of course, the answer was yes. I started my farm it was right after family reunion in 2013. I just took my first farm listing about 3 weeks ago, and when it closes, we will have a basically 5-to-1 return on our investment. And I am A-okay with that. So farming, definitely profitable, provided that you have the consistency to stick with it. And then keep in mind, obviously, once you have that first listing in your farm, it's only going to get easier from there. You now have a little bit of market share, you have a little bit more clout, they're actually seeing what you're doing. Great resource for taking your business to the next level. Education-wise, this was the first year I hired a coach. Really, it's my big takeaway. Everyone should have a coach. I've never seen it as an expense. I know that that's a big concern. To me, it's investing in myself. If an NBA basketball team has a coach, why wouldn't I? Those are professionals at the highest level. I should have one as well. I started with a productivity coach in our office, right for where I was in my business, perfect for the finances behind that. I'm assuming that offices can handle a productivity coach differently, but I paid her out of the close of escrow, and the office matched a portion of that as well. So I wasn't having to pay for the full coach myself, and I wasn't having to pay for it up front. She was only paid when I succeeded, which was awesome. Loved it, loved it. I do want to caution people when they hire a coach, it's not somebody who you show up on the phone that day and you maybe list out your problems and then they give you your solutions. You don't hand a man a fish, you teach him how to fish. And so there's a lot of deeper questions asked on how would that change your business, or what do you think needs to be done, or would that really take you to the next level? And they ask a lot of questions that really get you to dig deep and find the answers on your own. But there's a whole different level of accountability, and I think anytime you're paying for something, you're also going to be holding your money accountable. So hire a coach. I took Recruit Select for the first time. That was probably 2 months before I hired my assistant. And after taking Recruit Select, if you've taken it before, you also were probably so scared. One of the big things they hone in on is what the cost of a bad hire is. And you end up finding really it's insurmountable, besides the fact that they could somehow get you sued or something, and that there's that cost associated with that. There's also the cost associated with if you end up having to fire them, the time it'll take you to rehire somebody else. There could also be, like Diana teaches us in Bold, how she wasn't paying attention to her money and had an employee that actually stole from her. There is the financial cost associated with that. There's a lot of different scary things. So I remember thinking, I am going to take it slow and steady to win the race. We ended up, let's see, I followed the process to a T, but a lot of people ask specifically where I did some marketing. Craigslist, Facebook, emailing other agents. Those are pretty much the main three sources of getting the posting out there. Ashley, my executive assistant, actually came from, I suppose technically Facebook. We worked together and went to school together, but we weren't still friends and continuing that relationship. So it was something that she saw on Facebook, was interested in. I interviewed about 30 people after getting their discs. 30 applications, interviewed about 15, had a top 3, and then Ashley was, without a doubt, the perfect match for the job. As I would tell everybody now, I've never, ever looked back. And then on the flip side, I have a lot of friends who actually interviewed agents pretty much right at the same time, or interviewed somebody at the same time for the same position. And of everybody I know, I'm the only one who still has my executive assistant and is happy with them. So I highly suggest following the education, the programming, the questions, the process. It really helped take my business to the next level. So take Recruit Select. I took Bold again, and then you'll see I took more Bold again. And then also Family Reunion. I hear a lot of agents say when they go to Family Reunion that one of two things. It was so overwhelming, which don't get me wrong, it is. There's lots to learn, and if you're not in your hometown or whatever the case is, there's a lot of people to meet. You might be there by yourself, whatever the case is. And then the other issue I hear a lot with family reunion are people coming back with this list. And I don't even know if list is the right word, or maybe it's a book of ideas. They come back with hundreds of ideas and things to implement, and then 2 weeks later, the list/book is out the window, and they're back to doing the same old thing. My coach guided me to do two things while I was there. The first was to come up with like really 3 things that were most important to me. At that point in time, it was how to get better with prospecting. I really struggled with the phones. I was very afraid. Don't get me wrong, I still have those days where picking up the phone, it weighs 15 pounds just to pick it up. I really was interested in really what a farm is. I wanted to get more involved with this area and kind of had my eyes on. And then the third was how to hire somebody. So those, all of my classes, if the description didn't fit one of those 3 categories, I couldn't go to it. Even if I really wanted to go to a culture summit or something like that, it didn't fit where I wanted to be, and I didn't go there. So I went to those 3 classes, and then from those 3 topics, I picked 5 things I wanted to implement from each one. So I had a list of 15 items. Some were teeny, and then some were huge, like hiring an assistant. So there's a whole wide range, but the point is when you narrow your focus enough, like Gary teaches us in the one thing, when you can really focus in on what's most important to you at that point in time, it can really elevate your results and take you to the next level. So I highly recommend Family Reunion if you haven't been before, or if you've been and you already know that you need to go back. And then another thing that I really worked a lot on was focusing on what I was doing right, and not really engaging in a pity party, for lack of better words. I think hopefully this is more motivation, or just so people don't think that they're the only one, or maybe I was the only one. But I remember my first year, you go from, when you have your first fire appointment, that's what you talk about when you see your family that day. I remember telling my husband, oh my gosh, I have my first fire appointment, and it's incredible. And then you have your first closing, and that's incredible, and your first inspection is incredible. And then there's the flip side of that, and you have a buyer who got mad at you, or you have an appraisal that went wrong, and there's all these things that happen where you ride this roller coaster of emotion that you feel like you're doing so much. And I just remember feeling like I was always growing and always getting better. And then I was Rookie of the Year, and that was awesome. And then I started my second year, and probably the first 3 months I was just me crying on the phone with my coach because I felt like a failure, which is interesting when you take a step back and think about it, because, I mean, my business was still doubling. I was on the road to hire my first hire. Everything was good, but I still felt like I wasn't doing anything right. I just didn't feel like I was growing. It just felt so stagnant. And then so what I started doing is I started logging everything I did right. Everything from if I had a negative conversation with another agent that made me feel bad, how differently did I handle it this time than I would have a year ago? And for me, a negative conversation usually ruins my day. I have a pretty thin skin, so I remember one of the things is I could see as I was growing how it wouldn't affect me as much. Before, I may have literally cried from having the same conversation, whereas this time around I could brush it off, figure out the solution of the problem, and move forward. And that, to me, was a win. And I had to catalog all of these little tiny wins that made me realize I was in such a significantly different place than I had been just a year ago, even though the wins weren't my first transaction, which is pretty big when you're starting. They were, my business is running efficiently. I don't feel stressed. It was just a very different way of looking at the business, and so I encourage, if you're maybe having some of those mental roadblocks, first to know that you're not the only one, and second to catalog what your wins and your losses are, and how you can kind of take it to the next level. And then my last kind of takeaway from 2013 and life that first year after capping was giving back gives you so much more. I love this saying here from Zig, and I think that in real estate, we get really caught up with people who think that real estate is about buying and selling real estate, which that is a portion of my job, without a doubt. But there is so much more out there that will allow you to not only connect with more potential buyers and sellers, but also develop better rapport with agents, which would in turn make your transactions run a lot smoother. It'll connect you with people higher up in different organizations, like your local area association of realtors, connect you at a deeper level with your own office, which will make you want to work more comfortable working longer hours or working in the office or whatever the case may be. So I encourage you to also find a way to get involved. The results from last year, essentially, we almost doubled our business. We were at $50,000 from 2012. Keep in mind, I'm still the only producing agent on our team, so this is still more of an individual number. So up $50,000, volume only up 1.4 million, but what I really love about these numbers are that transactions are down 8. And I know we focus a lot on a high number of transactions, but something else I like to think about is doing less work and making more money. And that's really the takeaway from this year. I did less transactions. Most of those are rentals that we said goodbye to, which anyone who does a rental, unless you're in New York and can really reap the benefits of the fiscal benefits of a rental. I know out here we're talking just a couple $100s a punch, and you have to do the exact same amount of work. So by really focusing my intentions, we were able to reduce the number of transactions and almost double our income. Awesome. And then I suppose less numbery, I was actually our Scottsdale Area Association of Realtors 2013 Emerging Realtor of the Year. Awesome. It was their first inaugural Emerging Realtor of the Year. It's essentially an under 30 award for the area, and that was the first kind of my introduction into being able to lead in a level outside of Keller Williams. I'm pretty involved here in the office, serve on the ALC, head up the education committee, stuff like that. But this was the first time that I remember the chair of the executive board came up and said, you know what, we need to sit down and meet because we need to figure out how, together, we need to figure out how to get more young people involved in real estate. The fact that one person would come straight to me for that conversation made me realize that I was finally making a difference in what else is happening in real estate. It had nothing to do with buying and selling real estate. I'm sure there's a lot of people who, volume-wise, probably sold a lot more than me. I mean, it's only 4 million. I'm sure there's people who are doing 10 million, 20 million, who are also under 30. But it was the stuff I'd done outside of selling real estate that really made that difference. Our same Scottsdale Area Association of Realtors has a Leadership Academy class. I was blessed enough to be a graduate of that. It's a 12-week program to teach you about the area. Hired, obviously, my first executive assistant, and then I serve on the committee for SARS YPN, and then obviously on our executive board here at KWYP. Start thinking about some questions if anybody wants to do some Q&A at the end. We're almost done here. So kind of looking at where I am now, I'm looking into the future. This is my goal. This year I'm applying for Realtors 30 under 30. This is me putting it out there. It's everywhere. This picture is on the front door of the office. It's the background on my cell phone. It's the background on my computer. It's been posted on Facebook. This is what my goal is. Also, you can thank this creepy photo from my EA, Ashley. But that's the goal. To get to the goal, there's a lot of things along the way, and if you don't have a business plan that you're actually utilizing, you're really selling yourself short. So the first step would obviously be to be creating a business plan. And then how often are you reviewing it? Quarterly? Probably not enough. Monthly, I suppose better. I review mine weekly, and then I also have, I review my full plan weekly, and then daily I have constant reminders of all of our numbers. So coming up with a way that's best and most efficient for you to do that. Lead generation for this current year. We've been doing a lot with the farming, as I mentioned. We've been really working the phone. Facebook has been a continued huge part of it, and then the sphere of influence as well. Notice I'm not pulling in stuff that I haven't done before. I'm not working on expires right now. I want to master a couple different areas. I don't want to do 5 minutes of expires, 5 minutes of FISBOs, reaching out to my sphere for just a couple minutes each day. I want to be the best in such a small category of things that I'm able to excel in them a lot easier. For education, really the same thing. Family reunion, mega camps. I'm now coaching with MAPS and have been this year. We're on track to do about 1.5 times what we did last year, so doubling and then some. And I truly would relate that to my MAPS coach, Karen. She's really helping me take the business to the next level and really think outside of my box, which has me nervous all the time, but I appreciate it. And then taking Bold again this fall. And then teaching, which is the flip side, I suppose, of this. I've been teaching in the Market Center for a while now, and I've realized that when I teach a class, I probably get just as much out of it as some of the students do, because they challenge you, they ask different questions that maybe you're not as familiar with. There's a lot to it that you don't think of. You just maybe think of it as a source of your time or something. But it's pretty incredible, so I highly recommend teaching whatever it is you're good at in your office. And then know where you're at all of the time. I can tell you I'm 3 transactions behind what I need for what I want my goal to be this year. But that, with what we have in the pipeline, I'm actually caught up. I can tell you the exact GCI number, the number of transactions we've had closed, what we've got in escrow, the total commission dollar of what's in there, what we have in our pipeline. And knowing these numbers helps keep you up to date. If you're behind, like I am right now, I constantly have this drive that I know all the time that I'm just barely behind, and that keeps me moving some days where I may want to quit and back off the phones or whatever the case may be. So knowing where you're at. Here are my major takeaways. Read some books. These are the ones that I've read pretty recently that are my favorites. For anybody in our group today that falls under age 20, go buy right now on Amazon.com The Defining Decade. Literally is like my 20-year-old Bible. I love it. I think it really, and I also have a degree in psychology, so I appreciate a couple different sides of it, but this is the book to read if you're under 20. The other one's great for anybody in their business. Love it. Most people that I talk with, they either have one of 2 problems. They either have a lead generation problem where they don't have enough leads, or they have a leverage problem where they have so many leads or so much to do or whatever the case is that they need to leverage out this work. Figure out which category you're in and focus on that. And then obviously getting involved, do something outside of buying and selling real estate, be it with your office, be it with your association nearby, with the YPN group. Maybe you want to get involved in volunteer work. Do something outside of buying, selling real estate, and hanging out with your friends and family. It'll really get you connected to people on a different level. And then, as I mentioned before, my major takeaway is hire a coach. You need to find somebody that you click with. If you don't click with somebody, definitely change up who you're with. But once you find that right coach, it's going to exponentially change where your business is at. So now what I'm going to do is go into some questions. Does anybody have any so far? You can go ahead and type them in. Can I just see it on yours? Do you have any questions? Give me 1 second. We're trying to figure out. The questions are popping up on mine. Okay, so the first question I have from Bill Harden. Thanks, Bill. How do you like Mojo for farming? I love Mojo. It is literally, I can't imagine lead generating without it. Mojo started on just a couple of months ago. Typically right now I can average about at least 20 contacts an hour. Depends on the demographics of the area I'm calling, but at least 20 contacts. For the farming neighborhood, I'm finding that it's most helpful if I'm calling with Orcus. So when we had our listing, the open house, it going and hitting the market, those are questions or phone calls that I feel like I can be a lot more pointed on and show them my sense of worth. When I didn't have that, it was just a little bit harder to engage them. And then to answer your question about a single dialer or a triple dialer, I'm triple dial all the way. It's so intimidating the first time you do it, but once you get past the fear of, oh, what if too many people answer at once or something, it gets pretty easy. Mojo Dialer, just watch the video that they have online. It'll explain how the different dials work, but once you're going, it's a piece of cake, and it's really easy to kind of get back up on your feet if a couple people answer at once or what the case may be. Okay, so thanks, Joey. The question about 20 calls in an hour. He asked, what's my conversion ratio for those appointments? It depends on what I'm calling about. So right now I'm working on different scripts and kind of how to hone that, but I'm seeing my best numbers when I'm calling FSBOs on an appointment ratio. With circle dialing, which is calling a neighborhood like within a circle radius or something like that, I'm not seeing as many appointments being set, but I'm having a lot more follow-up conversations. So when people are kind of feeling down about their ratios, just keep in mind there's a lot smaller chance of you getting that first appointment right on the phone, but the follow-up is really where you're going to make your money. So don't forget that there's a lot more to it than just that initial phone call. That's all the questions that we've had so far. What else do we have, guys? Or we can wrap up. I'm done with either. Something else I tried a lot of back to the dialer question, we have an agent in our office who excels on expired listings. I mean, in some good months he can do 20 listings by himself in a month. It's incredible. I sat in on a lot of his phone calls so I could listen and gauge from there, and then we did a lot of work together. He would then listen to me make some calls and give me some feedback that way. So that was really helpful. But with the Mojo Dialer, nobody in my office is currently using it, or none that I know of at least. So it was really helpful when I was able to teach others. I didn't have that on my flip side, but maybe either if you're working Mojo or if somebody in your office is, watch them, because it'll literally take any of the stress away. It's such an easy method of lead generating that once you can watch it, it's a no-brainer. And we also got a question on team expansion going in the next year or two. I always thought that the buyer's agent was the next logical hire, and then of course I needed to refocus my energy on what the Red Book shows, what other agents are doing, and actually an admin position is the next one we're going to be hiring. We'll probably shoot for a transaction coordinator as my next big goal. We're hoping to do that probably at the end of this year. Right now we're a pretty well-oiled team, but the way that our production is trending, we very well may need to bring them on sooner rather than later. And then the first 2 quarters of next year we'll probably hire our buyer's agent. My goal is to get 15 active pieces of business at once, and once I'm there, to bring on that buyer's agent. So that's what we're really going for right now. As far as like my 2-year plan, that's sort of the path that I'm going on, but my 5-year plan is to actually take it to the 7th level of business, and then I myself would like to get involved in other areas of Keller Williams. My big dream goal, I suppose, is to work with KW Cares and be able to volunteer on a much higher level. And then, I'm really happy to hear that writing down your wins is helpful. I know somebody just mentioned that. Please do it, because it'll help you through some dark days, that's for sure. And also writing what you're grateful for. I did that for a while as well, and that was very helpful. Now I make more of a mental note to it. I probably should get back to writing. And then we have one other question. How did you get good at what you say on the phone? It's nice to hear. Sometimes I feel like I sound like an idiot. I actually once told somebody who answered the phone, I said, oh, sorry, my phone just took a dump on me, and I died. My sister was sitting in the room, and I was like crying because I was trying not to laugh, and it was just outrageous. So stupid stuff comes out when you don't use your script. Figure out a script that works for you. Do some research, and then once you really have a good script, you can, sky's the limit from there. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up unless there are any other questions. Anybody else? Well, if you have any questions that you don't want to ask now or that come up later, or if you want to see, I know the last time I did this presentation, we had a lot of people asking to see my listing presentation. If you want to see the How I Work form, really anything like that, go ahead and shoot me an email. My email is Kelly, K-E-L-L-Y, and my last name Henderson, Henderson, at KW.com. And then keep me in mind for any Phoenix real estate needs. As you guys know, that's where I'm doing. Michael Hernandez just asked me what he can do to help me. Oh, you're wonderful, Michael. I'll call you later. But anyway, yeah, let me know how I can help your guys' business, and if there is any way I can give back to you guys. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.